This is the 15th game of the World Championship 1986 between Karpov and Kasparov. Grunfeld defense D-98. D4, knight F6, C4, G6, knight C3, D5, knight F3, bishop G7, queen B3. Almost every time Kasparov has essayed the Grunfeld defense and Karpov has tried different systems. This time he uses queen B3, which was first played in the tournament chess in Rigozin versus Romanovsky, Leningrad in 1932, and became popular in 40s and then again in the 16th with Botvinnik as the most distinguished adherent. So let us go back. The last move played is queen B3, D into C4, queen into C4, Kasparov castles, E4, bishop G4. Maestro popularized this move with the queen bishop in the 50s, bishop E3, knight F D7. The immediate knight C6 is met by D5, bishop into F3. Let us go back and see. It's a lengthy combination, we will go back and see. Instead of knight F D7, knight C6, D5, bishop into F3, G into F3, knight E5, queen E2, C6, F4, knight E D7, bishop G2, with a clear advantage for white. Botvinnik versus Maestro, Kronigin 1946. So instead of playing immediate knight C6, Kasparov played knight F D7, rook D1, knight C6, bishop E2, knight B6, queen C5, queen D6, E5. E5 is a very good move. Instead of E5, we shall see other alternatives played here. Botvinnik versus Fischer in Varna 1962. That game went. Instead of E5, Botvinnik played H3. Ex-world champion Botvinnik. Fischer replayed bishop into F3, G into F3, rook F D8. Rook F D8 is a bad move. Instead of that, E6 could be played. Okay, let us go back. Fischer played rook D8, D5, knight E5, knight B5, queen F6, F4, knight E D7. Okay, let us go back. Last move played is the excellent move E5. queen into c5, d into c5, knight c8. Instead of knight c8, let us go back and see. If black plays knight d7, white can make a pawn sacrifice, typical on such situations where the life of one piece depends on the another. After knight d7, e6. After e6, there is another combination is there. Let us see one by one. h3. Instead of e6, bishop into f3, g into f3, knight d into e5, f4. After knight d7, let us go back and see the other combination. Knight d7, e6, bishop into e6, knight g5, bishop f5, g4. Because of this, knight will be lost. So that is why instead of knight d7, black played knight c8. Let us go back. Knight c8, knight b5, rook b8. Rook b8 is a excellent move. If black protects his c pawn by bishop f3, let us go back and see. If black, instead of playing rook b8, if black plays bishop into f3, bishop into f3, bishop into e5, he will be allowing white rook to d7. So black played rook b8, which is a good move. Knight into c7, e6, knight b5, knight a0 comes to e7, rook d2. This looks like an advanced defense of the b2 pawn, but it is in fact primarily to protect the bishop on e2. For example, if white castles, let us go back and see that. Instead of rook d2, if white castles, knight into e5. So now if knight into knight, bishop will be hanging. So white played rook d2, b6. Before taking the e5 pawn, black makes sure that his queen side pawns are secure. Okay, let us go back. Instead of b6, knight d5, h3, bishop into f3, bishop into f3, knight into e3, f into e3, knight into e5. So black want to make sure that all his queen pawns are safe. Let us go back. The last move played is d5. C into b6, a into b6, bishop g5, knight f5, b3, h6, bishop f6. Instead of bishop f6, bishop f4 is played. That's a bad move. Let us go back and see how it is bad. Bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, rook f d8. So black will be occupying the d file. Therefore, bishop f6 is played. Let us go back. Bishop f6. Bishop into f3. Bishop into f3. Knight into e5. Bishop into e5. Bishop into e5. At last white castles. Rook f d8. Rook f d1. Rook into d2. Rook into d2. Rook c8. g3. Rook c1 check. King g2. King f8. Bishop e4. King e7. And draw agreed because of the opposite allied bishops are there on the board. The powers are equal, including the pawns. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the 24 games of this World Championship and many more beautiful games of Bobby Fischer and the other World Championship matches. Thanks for watching once again.